Captain Malcolm Reynolds stood at the front of the crowded aircraft, microphone in hand, his voice cutting through the tension. "If you can't accept all of my passengers, then you're not welcome on my plane." The stunned silence that followed would forever change Jasmine and Jordan's lives. Before we dive into this incredible story of courage and standing up against discrimination, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe in equality and want to see more real stories of everyday heroes. Now, let's get into what led to this powerful moment. The morning sun streamed through the bedroom window as Jasmine Washington carefully packed her debate notes into a leather portfolio. Her twin brother Jordan was already dressed, methodically arranging his math textbooks in his backpack. At 17, the Washington twins were already making a name for themselves in academic circles throughout Atlanta. "You think Columbia will be impressed with a national championship?" Jordan asked, adjusting his glasses. His fingers tapped nervously against his calculator case, a habit that emerged whenever he mentioned their shared dream school. "They'd better be," Jasmine replied with a confident smile. "Your math proofs already caught their attention last year, and this competition could seal the deal for both of us." The twins had been preparing for the National Academic Excellence Competition in New York for months. Jordan, with his extraordinary gift for mathematics, had developed a new approach to solving complex equations that had caught the attention of university professors. Jasmine, equally talented in her own right, had become the youngest debate champion in Georgia state history, with a particular talent for constitutional law arguments. Their modest home in South Atlanta was filled with trophies and academic awards, hard-earned achievements that represented countless late nights studying. Their parents had instilled in them a mantra: excellence is the only option when the world expects you to fail. "First time flying," Jordan said, zipping his bag closed. "I've calculated the odds of a crash at approximately 1 in 11 million, but my stomach doesn't seem convinced by the statistics." Jasmine laughed. "We survive Atlanta public transit daily. A commercial airline should be luxury by comparison." Their Aunt Tabitha arrived precisely at 5:30 a.m., her ancient Buick rumbling in the driveway. She had volunteered to drive them to the airport while their parents finished last-minute arrangements to join them in New York the following day. "You two ready to soar with the Eagles?" Aunt Tabitha called as they loaded their luggage into her trunk. At 57, she had the energy of someone half her age and twice her optimism. "More like trying not to throw up with the Eagles," Jordan mumbled. Aunt Tabitha adjusted her colorful head wrap and fixed them with a serious look before starting the car. "Listen now. You're about to enter spaces where folks who look like us aren't always welcome. Hold your heads high, remember your worth, and don't let nobody make you feel small. Your brilliance is your passport, but your dignity is your shield." The drive to Atlanta International Airport took 40 minutes. Holiday travelers created a sea of humanity that flowed through the terminal entrances. The twins had never seen so many people moving with such determined purpose. "Our flight leaves at 9:15, Jasmine said, checking her boarding pass for the 20th time. "Summit Airlines, Gate B22. The security line stretched and curved like a great serpent. When they finally reached the checkpoint, the TSA agent barely glanced at the white businessman ahead of them before waving him through. When Jordan stepped forward, the same agent frowned. "Random screening," he announced, directing Jordan to step aside. Jasmine was selected for the same random check moments later. 20 minutes of additional screening later, they were finally allowed to proceed, now rushing to make their flight. The departure board showed their gate was at the farthest end of the terminal. Final boarding call for Summit Airlines Flight 2473 to New York LaGuardia, the announcement echoed as they sprinted toward Gate B22. Red-faced and breathless, they arrived just as the gate agent was preparing to close the door. "Washington? Jordan and Jasmine?" The agent checked their boarding passes with a raised eyebrow. "Just made it. Down the jet bridge, straight aboard." The twins stepped onto the plane, boarding passes clutched tightly in hand, a mixture of relief and excitement washing over their faces as they prepared for their first flight and the competition that awaited them in New York. 14B and 14C, Jasmine read from their boarding passes, pointing down the narrow aisle. The Boeing 737 was nearly full, passengers stuffing bags into overhead compartments and settling into their seats. The twins made their way through the cabin, counting row numbers as they went. "Here we are," Jordan said, stopping at row 14. He gestured for Jasmine to take the window seat, knowing his sister had been hoping for a view of the clouds. She squeezed past and settled in, immediately peering out at the ground crew loading luggage. "I can't believe we're actually flying," she whispered, her breath fogging the small oval window. Jordan took the middle seat beside her, carefully arranging his backpack under the seat in front. "According to the airline's website, we'll reach approximately 33,000 feet, he informed her, his anxiety manifesting as aviation trivia. "At that altitude, the outside temperature will be around -70 degrees Fahrenheit. Jasmine patted his hand. "Try not to calculate our potential energy at cruising altitude, okay? You'll make yourself sick before takeoff." The aisle seat beside them remained empty as the last passengers boarded. Just as the flight attendants were preparing to close the aircraft door, a commotion at the front of the cabin caught their attention. A woman in her early 60s swept down the aisle, designer handbag swinging from her arm. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in an immaculate bob, and diamond studs sparkled at her ears. She wore an expression of barely contained irritation as a flight attendant followed close behind. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but first class is completely full," the flight attendant was saying. "14A is your assigned seat for this flight." The woman stopped abruptly at their row, glancing at the seat number and then at Jordan and Jasmine. Her lips tightened into a thin line. "This is unacceptable," she declared, loud enough for several rows to hear. "I paid for first class. I'm a Platinum Elite member." "I understand, Ms. Whitfield," the flight attendant replied. "As I explained, there was an aircraft change that reduced our first-class cabin size. We've already processed the downgrade refund to your account." Eleanor Whitfield's gaze swept over the twins as if they were an inconvenient piece of furniture. "And this is all that's available?" she asked, making no effort to lower her voice. Jordan shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Jasmine stared determinedly out the window. "I'm afraid so. The flight is completely full," the attendant responded. With a dramatic sigh, Eleanor placed her designer bag in the overhead bin and perched on the edge of seat 14A, as far from Jordan as the confined space would allow. The scent of expensive perfume enveloped their row. "I suppose this will have to do," she muttered, pulling out her phone and pointedly turning away from the twins. For several minutes, an uneasy silence settled over row 14. Jordan opened his math textbook, trying to focus on equations rather than the tension crackling beside him. Jasmine continued looking out the window, her reflection in the glass showing her clenched jaw. As the flight attendants began their safety demonstration, Eleanor shifted in her seat, accidentally bumping Jordan's elbow. "Sorry," Jordan said automatically, though he hadn't been at fault. Eleanor's response was a barely audible murmur, "Of course they had to seat me here." Jasmine turned from the window, eyebrows raised. "Excuse me?" "Nothing, dear," Eleanor replied with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just wondering why Summit Airline seems to think their platinum members deserve to be crammed into economy with," she paused, looking them over, "school children." "We're traveling to an academic competition in New York," Jasmine said coolly. "National finals." "How nice for you," Eleanor replied, her tone suggesting it was anything but. She pulled a sanitizing wipe from her purse and ostentatiously cleaned the armrests. The plane began pushing back from the gate, the captain's voice crackling over the intercom with welcome announcements. Eleanor glanced at her watch repeatedly, sighing loudly enough to draw attention from passengers across the aisle. When the flight attendant named Regina Porter came through checking that seatbelts were fastened, Eleanor raised a manicured hand to stop her. "Excuse me," she called. "Is there any possibility of a different seat becoming available? Perhaps in first class if someone doesn't show up?" Regina smiled professionally. "I'm sorry, Ms. Whitfield, but the flight is completely full. Every seat is assigned. I understand, but surely something can be arranged, Eleanor insisted, lowering her voice slightly. I'm not comfortable in my current situation. Regina's eyes flicked briefly to the twins, then back to Eleanor. I'm afraid there's nothing I can do at the moment. Perhaps after takeoff. This is unacceptable, Eleanor interrupted, her voice rising. I specifically choose Summit for my frequent travel because of your service standards. And now I'm expected to spend 2 hours squeezed in beside. She gestured vaguely toward Jordan and Jasmine without looking at them. Several nearby passengers turned to watch the developing scene. A man across the aisle had his phone tilted in their direction, apparently recording. Ma'am, Regina said, her professional demeanor intact but her voice firmer, if you have concerns about your seating assignment, I'd be happy to discuss them with you once we're at cruising altitude. I have concerns now, Eleanor snapped. She turned to look directly at the twins for the first time. No offense, but I paid for first class and was downgraded, and now I'm stuck next to them. I at least expect to be seated with other business travelers. Jordan's textbook closed with a snap. We paid for our tickets just like you did, he said, his voice quiet but steady. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. Well. I'm sure you did, though I wonder who. Ms. Whitfield, Regina interrupted, I need to continue my safety checks. I'll return after takeoff. But Eleanor was now fully engaged, her indignation finding a target. I refuse to sit here, she declared loudly, unbuckling her seatbelt. This is completely inappropriate. I'm a Platinum Elite member who paid for first class but they overbooked, and now I'm stuck next to them. I refuse to sit here. The cabin fell silent, all pretense of privacy abandoned as dozens of passengers stared openly at the unfolding drama in row 14. Regina Porter had been a flight attendant for Summit Airlines for 12 years. In that time, she'd handled drunk passengers, medical emergencies, and countless tantrums from entitled travelers. But something about the venom in Eleanor Whitfield's voice made her stomach tighten with a different kind of tension. Ms. Whitfield, Regina said, keeping her voice low and controlled, I understand you're upset about your seating arrangement, but I need you to lower your voice and remain seated. The aircraft is preparing for takeoff. Eleanor's perfectly lined lips curved into a dismissive smile. I don't think you understand who you're speaking to. I personally know Victor Harrington on your executive board. One phone call. I'm not concerned with who you know, Regina interrupted, her professional mask firmly in place. I'm concerned with flight safety regulations that require all passengers to be seated with seatbelts fastened during takeoff. By now, the confrontation had drawn the attention of everyone within earshot. Phones were raised throughout the cabin, recording the incident. A mother in the row behind covered her young daughter's ears. Jordan sat rigidly in seat 14B, his dark skin flushed with humiliation and anger. Beside him, Jasmine had abandoned all pretense of looking out the window and was staring straight ahead, her jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped visibly in her cheek. I want to speak to your supervisor, Eleanor demanded, voice rising. These people are making me uncomfortable. These people? Jordan repeated, unable to contain himself any longer. You mean the paying passengers you've been insulting since you sat down? Eleanor turned to him with a look of exaggerated surprise. Young man, I wasn't speaking to you. This is between me and the flight staff. It stopped being just between you and the staff when you started making comments about us, Jasmine interjected, her debate training evident in her measured tone. We haven't done anything to make you uncomfortable except exist in these seats. A murmur of agreement rippled through the nearby passengers. Someone toward the back of the plane called out, "Let them be, lady." Eleanor's face flushed crimson. I never said anything about. I just expect certain standards when I fly, and... Ms. Whitfield, Regina cut in, I need to continue my pre-flight checks. Please remain seated, and I'll return to address your concerns after takeoff. I will not sit here, Eleanor declared, standing up despite the illuminated seatbelt sign. Find me another seat immediately. The commotion had attracted the attention of Benjamin Carter, the head flight attendant, who made his way down the aisle from the front of the plane. At 45, Benjamin had the composed demeanor of someone who had seen it all. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his deep voice carrying an authority that momentarily silenced Eleanor. Regina quickly briefed him in hushed tones while Eleanor stood awkwardly in the narrow aisle, blocking other flight attendants trying to complete their pre-flight duties. "Ms. Whitfield," Benjamin said after listening to Regina, "I understand you're unhappy with your seat assignment, but standing in the aisle is not an option right now. Please return to your seat, and we'll see what can be done after takeoff." "I will not sit next to these individuals," Eleanor replied, gesturing dismissively at the twins. "They've been rude and confrontational since I arrived." Jordan's mouth fell open in disbelief. "That's completely untrue. You're the one who—" "Young man," Eleanor cut him off, "your attitude is precisely the problem. So aggressive. I don't feel safe." The absurdity of a grown woman claiming to feel threatened by two 17-year-old honor students was not lost on the surrounding passengers. A chorus of disapproving murmurs rippled through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," came an announcement over the intercom, "this is your captain speaking. We're currently delayed in our departure sequence due to an issue in the cabin. We ask for your patience as our crew resolves this matter." Benjamin turned to Eleanor with renewed urgency. "Ma'am, you're now delaying the flight for everyone. Please take your seat immediately." "Not until you find me appropriate seating," she insisted. "Away from them." Benjamin surveyed the full cabin before turning to Jordan and Jasmine. "Would either of you be willing to switch to separate seats to accommodate Ms. Whitfield's request? We might be able to find 2 single seats." Jordan's face darkened. "Why should we move? We didn't do anything wrong." "I understand," Benjamin replied quietly. "I'm just trying to resolve this situation." "The situation," Jasmine said clearly, "is that this woman doesn't want to sit next to us because we're black. Let's not pretend it's about anything else." Eleanor gasped theatrically. "How dare you? This has nothing to do with—" "I never said anything about—" The cabin door opened again, and Kevin Phillips, the gate agent, stepped aboard with a clipboard. He conferred briefly with Benjamin before addressing Eleanor. "Ms. Whitfield, I understand there's a seating issue. The flight is completely full, but if it's absolutely necessary, we might be able to ask for volunteers to switch after takeoff." "It is absolutely necessary," Eleanor insisted. "I cannot and will not sit here." Kevin turned to the twins. "Perhaps you two wouldn't mind." "We paid for these seats," Jordan interrupted, his voice steady but trembling slightly with emotion. "We're sitting together because we're traveling together. We've done nothing wrong. Why should we move?" Kevin hesitated, clearly torn between resolving the conflict quickly and doing what was right. The impasse had now delayed the flight by 15 minutes. Passengers were checking watches and phones, sighing pointedly. The tension in the cabin was palpable, with most eyes fixed on the standoff in row 14. Jordan's question hung in the air, unanswered: "Why should we move?" Captain Malcolm Reynolds removed his headset inside the cockpit, the radio chatter from air traffic control momentarily silenced. His co-pilot, First Officer Diana Chen, glanced at him with concern. 15 minutes delayed already," she noted. "What do you think is happening back there?" Malcolm frowned, his weathered face creasing with lines earned from 20 years in the Air Force before joining Summit Airlines. "Whatever it is, it should have been resolved by now. We're losing our departure slot." The cockpit phone buzzed. Malcolm picked it up, listening intently as Benjamin Carter briefed him on the situation. His expression darkened with each passing second. "I'll be right there," he said finally, hanging up the phone. "Problem?" Diana asked. "Passenger dispute. Apparently someone's refusing to sit next to 2 teenagers because of their race." Diana shook her head. "Seriously? In 2025? Some people are living in a different century, Malcolm replied, standing up. Take over communications. I'll handle this. You sure? Protocol says to call security for passenger disputes. Malcolm paused at the cockpit door. Sometimes protocol needs a human touch. Captain Reynolds rarely left the cockpit once passengers were aboard. His domain was the flight deck, the complex instruments, and the sky beyond the windshield. But something about Benjamin's description of the situation struck a nerve. As he emerged from the cockpit, conversations throughout the cabin hushed. The sight of a pilot in the passenger cabin before takeoff usually signaled something significant. Malcolm's 6'2" frame commanded attention, his uniform impeccable, his silver-streaked hair cropped close in a style that hinted at his military past. He made his way down the aisle with deliberate steps, nodding politely to passengers as he passed. When he reached row 14, he took in the scene, Eleanor Whitfield standing awkwardly in the aisle, Benjamin and Regina flanking her, and the Washington twins sitting stiffly in their seats, faces tense with controlled emotion. "I'm Captain Malcolm Reynolds," he said, his deep voice carrying naturally. "I understand we have a situation that's delaying our departure." Benjamin leaned in to brief him, but Malcolm held up a hand. "I'd like to hear directly from those involved." He turned to Eleanor. "Ma'am, could you tell me what's happening here?" Eleanor straightened, clearly pleased to address someone she perceived as an authority figure. "Captain, I'm a Platinum Elite member who paid for first class but was downgraded due to an aircraft change. That's already unacceptable, but then I was seated here," she gestured vaguely toward the twins without looking at them, "and these young people have been confrontational and rude. I simply asked to be moved to a more appropriate seat." Malcolm nodded, his expression neutral. "I see. And you are?" he asked, turning to the twins. "Jordan Washington," Jordan replied. "This is my sister Jasmine. We're traveling to New York for the National Academic Excellence Competition." "Congratulations on making it to Nationals," Malcolm said, genuine warmth in his voice. "That's quite an achievement. Now, can you tell me your perspective on what's happening?" Jasmine spoke up, her voice clear despite the tension. "Captain Reynolds, this woman has been making discriminatory comments since she arrived at our row. She's made it clear she doesn't want to sit next to us because of our race, though she's careful not to say it explicitly." "That's a lie," Eleanor interjected. "I never said anything about race." "You didn't have to," Jordan replied. "Your meaning was clear enough." Malcolm held up his hands. "One at a time, please." He turned back to Eleanor. "Ms. Whitfield. Eleanor Whitfield. Ms. Whitfield, can you explain what specifically about these passengers makes you uncomfortable sitting here?" Eleanor hesitated, suddenly aware of the many eyes watching her, the phones recording. "It's not about them specifically. It's the principle. I paid for first class. Which I understand was refunded due to the aircraft change," Malcolm noted. "That affected several passengers today, not just you." "Yes, but then to be seated here," she trailed off, apparently realizing the hole she was digging. Malcolm's expression remained professional, but something hardened in his eyes. As a black man who had risen through the ranks of the Air Force when diversity was more slogan than reality, he recognized the careful language of prejudice when he heard it. He remembered his early days as a lieutenant, overhearing senior officers explain why he wasn't the right fit for certain assignments. The careful avoidance of explicit bias while practicing it nonetheless was familiar territory. "Ms. Whitfield, would you step out to the jet bridge with me for a moment?" he asked, his tone making it clear this wasn't really a request. Eleanor followed him out, looking somewhat relieved to escape the scrutiny of the cabin. Once the aircraft door closed behind them, Malcolm turned to face her directly. "Ms. Whitfield, I'll be frank. This flight is already delayed. We have a full aircraft of passengers who will miss connections if we don't depart soon. What exactly would make you comfortable enough to take your assigned seat so we can leave?" Eleanor's demeanor changed, her voice lowering conspiratorially. Captain, surely you understand my position. I'm an executive who travels frequently for business. I expect a certain caliber of fellow passengers when I fly. I paid for first class specifically to avoid, well, certain situations. Malcolm's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Certain situations or certain people, Ms. Whitfield? I don't appreciate what you're implying, she replied, color rising in her cheeks. All I'm asking is to be moved away from those two. They're loud, they're confrontational, and they don't belong. She stopped herself abruptly. They don't belong where, exactly? Malcolm asked, his voice dangerously quiet. That's not what I meant. I think it's exactly what you meant, Malcolm replied. Here's what's going to happen. This plane needs to depart. You have two options: return to your assigned seat and complete this flight without further disruption, or deplane now and rebook on another flight. Eleanor's eyes widened in disbelief. Are you threatening to remove me from this flight? Do you have any idea who I am? I personally know Victor Harrington on your executive board. One phone call from me would be welcome, Malcolm interrupted. I'm sure Mr. Harrington would be interested to hear how you've delayed an entire flight because you refused to sit next to two black teenagers traveling to an academic competition. Eleanor gasped. This is outrageous. I never said anything about. You didn't have to, Malcolm echoed Jordan's earlier words. Your meaning was clear enough. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in a public place? What would you have done in Captain Reynolds' situation? Comment number 1 if you believe he's doing the right thing so far, or number 2 if you think he should have called security instead. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to see more stories about everyday heroes standing up against injustice. What do you think Eleanor will do next? Will she back down or escalate the situation further? Let's find out. The jet bridge was silent except for the distant rumble of aircraft engines and the occasional announcement echoing from the terminal. Eleanor Whitfield stood rigid, her designer handbag clutched to her chest like armor. This is absurd, she finally said. You're taking the word of two teenagers over a loyal customer who spends thousands with your airline every year. Malcolm's expression remained impassive. This isn't about taking sides, Ms. Whitfield. It's about ensuring all passengers are treated with dignity and respect on my aircraft. Respect? Eleanor's voice rose sharply. Where was the respect when I was downgraded from first class? Where was the respect when your staff ignored my legitimate concerns? Your downgrade was due to an aircraft change that affected multiple passengers, and you've been fully refunded the difference, Malcolm replied evenly. As for your legitimate concerns, I've yet to hear a single legitimate reason why you can't sit in your assigned seat. Eleanor's strategy shifted, her voice suddenly trembling with manufactured vulnerability. You don't understand. I have anxiety about flying. I need specific accommodations. Those young people were making me uncomfortable with their hostile attitudes. Ms. Whitfield, Malcolm said, his patience visibly thinning, I've reviewed the situation with my crew and several witnesses. The only hostility in row 14 came from you. The Washington twins were simply existing in the seats they paid for. So that's it? You're taking their side? Malcolm sighed. This isn't about sides. But yes, I'm standing with passengers who did nothing wrong and have been subjected to your thinly veiled prejudice since you boarded. Eleanor's face contorted with indignation. How dare you accuse me of prejudice? My charitable foundation has donated to urban youth programs. I have black friends who would be appalled at how I'm being treated. I'm sure they would be, Malcolm replied dryly. Ms. Whitfield, we've delayed this flight long enough. What's your decision? Return to your assigned seat, or deplane and rebook? Eleanor stared at him, seemingly unable to believe her tactics weren't working. Finally, she drew herself up with cold dignity. If those are my only options, then the choice is clear. Either they go, or I go. Then I'll have the gate agent assist you with rebooking, Malcolm said without hesitation. Eleanor blinked, momentarily stunned. What? You said either they go or you go. The Washington twins have done nothing wrong and are keeping their seats. That means you'll be deplaning. You can't be serious. Do you have any idea the lawsuit this will trigger? I'll have your job for this. That's your right, Malcolm replied calmly. Kevin will assist you with your luggage and rebooking. He gestured to the gate agent who had been waiting discreetly nearby. Eleanor's face flushed deep crimson. This is discrimination against a paying customer. I'll be calling Summit's executive offices the moment I'm off this plane. That's your prerogative, Malcolm said. Kevin, please help Ms. Whitfield with her belongings. Kevin stepped forward, professional but clearly uncomfortable. Ms. Whitfield, if you'll come with me, I'll need you to fill out some paperwork and then we can discuss rebooking options. Paperwork? What paperwork? Eleanor demanded. Standard procedure when a passenger is removed from a flight, Kevin explained. We'll need to document the reason for removal and process your checked luggage for retrieval. The reality of the situation finally seemed to dawn on Eleanor. Her shoulders slumped slightly, the fight momentarily leaving her body. I can't believe this is happening. Your personal items? Malcolm prompted, nodding toward the cabin. Kevin spoke into his radio, and moments later, Regina appeared with Eleanor's designer handbag and small carry-on suitcase. This is how Summit Airlines treats its elite customers? Eleanor asked, a final attempt at leveraging her status. No, Malcolm replied firmly. This is how Summit Airlines treats anyone who refuses to respect their fellow passengers. Safe travels, Ms. Whitfield. As Eleanor was escorted back up the jet bridge toward the terminal, Malcolm took a moment to compose himself. In 20 years of military service and 7 years as a commercial pilot, he'd faced many difficult decisions. This one might cost him, professionally speaking, but he couldn't bring himself to regret it. He returned to the aircraft, where a hushed silence fell as he made his way down the aisle. The expressions on the passengers' faces ranged from shock to approval. As he passed row 14, he nodded briefly to Jordan and Jasmine, who stared back with wide, disbelieving eyes. At the front of the cabin, Malcolm took the intercom handset. He knew company protocol called for a discreet resolution and minimal acknowledgement of the incident. But something told him this moment required more. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. I apologize for the delay in our departure. We should be underway shortly. At Summit Airlines, we have a fundamental commitment to treating all passengers with dignity and respect. That's not just a slogan on our website, it's a principle I expect everyone on this aircraft to uphold, including myself and my crew. He paused, scanning the cabin before continuing. We come from different backgrounds, different generations, different walks of life. But for the next 2 hours, we're all traveling together. I can't control your personal beliefs, but on this aircraft, I do expect civilized behavior toward your fellow passengers and my crew. If that's something you're unable to provide, then Summit Airlines isn't the right carrier for you. A smattering of applause broke out, quickly spreading until most of the cabin was clapping. Malcolm nodded once, returned the handset, and made his way back to the cockpit. As he settled into his seat, First Officer Chen raised an eyebrow. Everything handled? We're cleared to depart, Malcolm confirmed, reaching for his headset. Though I suspect there'll be paperwork waiting when we land. Worth it? She asked. Malcolm thought of the Washington twins, of their dignity in the face of Eleanor's behavior, of his own experiences facing similar treatment throughout his career. Absolutely, he replied, turning his attention to the pre-flight checklist. Behind him, the cabin returned to normal operations. Flight attendants completed their safety demonstrations, passengers fastened seatbelts, and Summit Airlines Flight 2473 finally pushed back from the gate, 40 minutes behind schedule. At 33,000 feet above Virginia, Jordan Washington closed his calculus textbook and stared at the ceiling of the aircraft. For the past hour, he'd been pretending to study, but the same equation had been swimming before his eyes without registering. Beside him, Jasmine had her eyes closed, though he knew she wasn't sleeping either. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Jasmine opened her eyes. "Just processing." "You?" "Same." He glanced at the now empty aisle seat beside him. "Did that really happen?" Before Jasmine could answer, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes leaned across the aisle. "Excuse me," she said. "I just wanted to say how impressed I was with how you two handled yourselves back there. So much maturity and grace." Jordan nodded awkwardly, unsure how to respond to praise for enduring racism. "Thanks. My daughter's about your age," the woman continued. "I'd be so proud if she stood her ground like you did." Similar interactions happened throughout the flight. A businessman stopped on his way to the lavatory to express his support. An elderly couple passed them a note of encouragement. Flight attendants offered them extra snacks and drinks. "It's weird," Jasmine whispered to Jordan after the fifth such encounter. "Everyone's treating us like we did something brave, but all we did was exist in the seats we paid for." "That's America for you," Jordan replied. "Existing while black is an act of courage." 3 rows behind them, Aiden Roberts was already editing the video he'd captured of the entire incident. At 26, Aiden had built a substantial following on social media platforms by documenting instances of everyday injustice. His hands moved quickly across his phone screen, adding captions and trimming the footage to highlight the most powerful moments. "This is going to explode," he murmured to himself, adding hashtags, #FlyingWhileBlack, #CaptainStans, #Summit Airlines. By the time the flight was crossing into New York airspace, Aiden had uploaded the 10-minute video to multiple platforms. The plane's Wi-Fi signal was weak, but strong enough for the upload to complete just before the captain announced their initial descent. The twins were gathering their belongings when Benjamin Carter, the head flight attendant, approached their row. "Mr. and Miss Washington," he said quietly, "Captain Reynolds asked me to give you this." He handed them a business card with a handwritten note on the back: "If you need anything during your stay in New York, please don't hesitate to call. Your dignity today inspired everyone on this flight. Good luck at your competition." As passengers deplaned at LaGuardia Airport, several stopped to offer words of support or simply nod in solidarity. The twins moved through the terminal in a daze, the morning's events still surreal. "Our phones are blowing up," Jasmine noted as they turned them on after landing. 10 missed calls from Mom, 7 from Dad, and, wait, what's happening on social media? Jordan looked over her shoulder at the screen. Someone posted a video. By the time they reached their hotel in Manhattan, Aiden's video had accumulated over 3 million views across platforms. #CaptainStans was trending nationally, with thousands sharing their own experiences of discrimination while traveling. The hotel lobby television was tuned to a news channel where a panel was already discussing the incident. The cheer-in at the bottom of the screen read, "Airline pilot takes stand against racism, removes first-class passenger." "That's us," Jordan said numbly, pointing at the blurry figures visible in the background of the video being played. At the check-in desk, the hotel clerk did a double-take upon seeing their names. "Are you the Washington twins from the flight?" she asked, eyes wide. When they nodded uncomfortably, she quickly upgraded them to a suite. Meanwhile, in the Summit Airlines executive offices in Atlanta, the public relations department was in crisis mode. Phones rang constantly as reporters sought comment on the viral incident. Social media managers watched in real time as mentions of the airline skyrocketed, sentiment analysis showing a complex mixture of support for the captain's actions and concern about customer service protocols. Victor Harrington, Executive Vice President of Customer Experience, stormed into the PR war room, his face thunderous. "Someone explain to me why I'm learning about this from CNN instead of our incident reporting system." "Sir, it only happened a few hours ago," a nervous PR assistant explained. "The flight just landed in New York." "Where's the captain now?" Harrington demanded. "Captain Reynolds is completing his post-flight duties at LaGuardia." He's scheduled to deadhead back to Atlanta tonight. Tell him not to board that flight. He's suspended pending investigation. I want him in my office tomorrow morning. The PR director cleared her throat. Sir, suspending him might not be the best approach from a public relations standpoint. The public is overwhelmingly supporting his actions. I don't care if Jesus Christ himself is tweeting in support, Harrington snapped. We have procedures and protocols for passenger disputes. Taking sides and removing a platinum elite member who spends tens of thousands with us annually is not in those protocols. Back in New York, the Washington twins finally reached their parents by phone. Are you both okay? Their mother asked, her voice tight with concern. We've seen the video. Your father wanted to drive up there immediately. We're fine, Mom, Jasmine assured her. Just a little overwhelmed. The airline called us, their father added. They're offering compensation and a formal apology. Some VP named Harrington. Jordan frowned. Apologizing to us or to her? To you, of course. They're offering free flights for a year and a $10,000 travel voucher. The twins exchanged glances. That feels weird, Jasmine said. Like they're trying to buy our silence. Later that evening, as they tried to focus on preparing for the competition, a notification alerted them to breaking news: Summit Airlines pilot suspended after viral racism incident. Jasmine clicked on the article and read aloud, Captain Malcolm Reynolds has been suspended pending an internal investigation into his handling of a passenger dispute. Summit Airlines released a statement affirming their commitment to both customer service and diversity, noting that all perspectives in this unfortunate incident are being reviewed. Jordan shook his head in disbelief. He's being punished for doing the right thing. We can't let that happen, Jasmine said, determination hardening her voice. We can't accept their hush money either. What are you thinking? Jasmine was already typing a response to the airline's offer. I'm thinking we have a voice now. And it's time to use it. Captain Malcolm Reynolds unlocked the door to his suburban Atlanta home, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. It was past midnight, his return flight having been delayed due to weather. The house was quiet except for the soft clicking of their golden retriever's nails on the hardwood floor as the dog greeted him. Hey, Max, Malcolm whispered, kneeling to scratch behind the dog's ears. Where's your mom? Right here, came a voice from the kitchen doorway. Leah Reynolds stood with her arms crossed, still dressed despite the late hour. Her natural hair was wrapped in a colorful scarf, and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. I was beginning to think they detained you at the airport. Malcolm straightened with a weary smile. Not far from the truth. I got cornered by 3 different gate agents and a flight attendant I've never even worked with, all wanting to shake my hand. You've become quite the celebrity while you were in the air, Leah said, leading him into the kitchen where her laptop sat open on the table. It's everywhere, Malcolm. The video, the hashtags, the think pieces about the pilot who took a stand. Malcolm sighed, dropping his flight bag on a chair. That wasn't the plan. I was just doing what needed to be done. Since when has doing the right thing ever been your plan? Leah asked with a knowing smile. She'd been married to Malcolm for 23 years, had supported him through his military career and the transition to commercial aviation. His moral compass was one of the things she loved most about him, even when it complicated their lives. Harrington called, Malcolm said, opening the refrigerator. Wants me in his office at 9 tomorrow morning. Victor Harrington. That blowhard from Executive Row who keeps forgetting your name at company functions. Malcolm nodded, pulling out leftovers. The very same. He's not happy. Are you suspended? Leah asked directly. Pending investigation, Malcolm confirmed, his voice neutral as he placed the container in the microwave. Standard procedure, they say. There's nothing standard about this situation, Leah argued, turning her laptop to face him. Look. The screen showed a social media feed filled with posts about the incident. The hashtag Stand with Captain Reynolds was trending, with thousands of people sharing the video and expressing support. Airlines employees, pilots' unions, civil rights organizations, and ordinary citizens were rallying behind his decision. "You did the right thing," Leah said firmly. "And the public knows it." "The public doesn't sign my paychecks," Malcolm replied pragmatically, though a small smile tugged at his lips as he scrolled through the supportive messages. As Malcolm ate his late dinner, Leah updated him on the developments he'd missed while flying. The Washington twins had turned down the airline's compensation offer, instead demanding a public apology and policy changes. Eleanor Whitfield had given an interview to a sympathetic news outlet, claiming she was the victim of reverse discrimination and threatening a lawsuit. Civil rights organizations were calling for a boycott of Summit Airlines until they reinstated Malcolm. "It's a proper storm," Leah concluded. Summit stock dropped 4% today. Malcolm rubbed his temples. "That's not what I wanted." "What did you want?" He considered the question. "I wanted those kids to know that not everyone would stand by while they were treated that way. That sometimes, people in authority will do the right thing, even when it's hard." Leah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Mission accomplished, Captain." The next morning, Malcolm arrived at Summit Airlines headquarters precisely at 9, dressed in his full uniform despite his suspended status. The lobby was unusually busy, with security guards positioned at various points and employees casting curious glances his way. The corporate communications floor was in chaos. Harrington's secretary ushered Malcolm past cubicles where PR staff huddled around monitors, tracking social media sentiment and news coverage. Through glass-walled conference rooms, he glimpsed executives in intense discussions, gesturing at presentation slides showing plummeting numbers. Victor Harrington's corner office offered a panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline, the morning sun glinting off skyscrapers. The man himself stood looking out the window, hands clasped behind his back. At 58, Harrington had the polished appearance of someone who considered himself immensely important. His silver hair was impeccably styled, his suit custom-tailored to disguise his expanding waistline. "Captain Reynolds," he said without turning around. "Please take a seat." Malcolm remained standing. "I prefer to stand for this conversation, sir." Harrington turned, irritation flashing across his face. "Very well. Do you understand the situation you've created?" "I understand I made a decision as captain of my aircraft to ensure the safety and dignity of all passengers." "You removed a platinum elite member who spends over $50,000 annually with this airline," Harrington countered, returning to his desk and picking up a folder. "Eleanor Whitfield. Board member of 3 Fortune 500 companies. Major philanthropist. Connected to half the corporate accounts in the Southeast. I removed a passenger who was creating a hostile environment based on racial prejudice," Malcolm replied evenly. Harrington's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation, Captain. Ms. Whitfield has categorically denied any racial motivation." "Of course she has. She's threatening a 7-figure lawsuit for defamation and discrimination." Malcolm nodded calmly. "I expected as much." "Did you also expect to become the centerpiece of a public relations nightmare? To have our customer service protocols questioned on national television? To have civil rights organizations organizing boycotts? With all due respect, sir, I didn't create this situation. I responded to it in accordance with our stated values of dignity and respect for all passengers." Harrington slammed the folder down. "You chose sides. That's not your job. Your job is to fly the plane and call security if there's a problem you can't resolve. If I'd called security, those teens would have been the ones removed," Malcolm said quietly. "We both know that's how these situations typically play out. The path of least resistance. That would have been protocol. Sometimes protocol perpetuates injustice." Harrington's face flushed. "This isn't about justice, Reynolds. This is about running an airline. About customer satisfaction and shareholder value. Perhaps it should be about justice, came a new voice from the doorway. Both men turned to see Leona Washington standing there, elegant in a tailored suit, her expression formidable. As Summit Airlines chief diversity officer, she rarely involved herself in operational disputes, focusing instead on corporate policy and hiring practices. "Leona," Harrington said, clearly surprised. "We're in the middle of a disciplinary matter." "A disciplinary matter that falls squarely within my purview," she replied, entering the office without waiting for an invitation. "Victor, the board is convening an emergency session at 11. They've asked for Captain Reynolds to be present." "The board?" Harrington repeated, his confidence visibly faltering. "Why wasn't I informed?" "You're being informed now," Leona said coolly. "Captain Reynolds, would you mind waiting outside for a moment? I need to brief Mr. Harrington on some developments." Malcolm nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind him. Through the glass, he could see Harrington's expression transform from confusion to alarm as Leona spoke. The executive began pacing, gesturing emphatically, occasionally stopping to stare at documents Leona presented. Meanwhile, in New York, Jordan and Jasmine Washington were attempting to focus on their upcoming competition rounds despite the continuing media storm. Their hotel room phone rang constantly until they disconnected it. Their parents had arrived late the previous night, forming a protective buffer between the twins and the growing public interest in their story. "You should be preparing for your mathematics presentation," their father said to Jordan, who was scrolling through yet another news article about the incident. "This will all still be here after the competition." "I can't focus," Jordan admitted. "They suspended him for standing up for us, Dad." "How is that right?" His father sighed, sitting beside him on the hotel sofa. "It's not right. But it's not surprising either. Systems protect themselves, son. They're designed to maintain the status quo. Then the system needs to change," Jasmine said, looking up from her debate notes. "And maybe this is how it starts." Their mother, who had been quietly making calls in the corner of the suite, hung up her phone with a satisfied expression. "Well, you might get your wish." That was Richard Henderson. "The civil rights attorney?" their father asked, surprised. She nodded. "He was on our flight. Witnessed the whole thing. He's offered to represent us pro bono if we want to push Summit Airlines for policy changes rather than compensation." Jordan and Jasmine exchanged glances. "Let's do it," they said in unison. Back in Atlanta, the Summit Airlines boardroom buzzed with tension. Board members spoke in hushed tones, occasionally glancing at Malcolm, who sat quietly at the far end of the table. Harrington entered last, his usual confidence notably diminished. Board Chair Patricia Alvarez called the meeting to order. "We've convened this emergency session to address the situation involving Captain Reynolds and the subsequent public reaction. Victor, you were handling the investigation. What's your assessment?" Harrington cleared his throat. "After reviewing the incident, it's clear that Captain Reynolds violated company protocol by personally intervening in a passenger dispute rather than calling airport security. While his intentions may have been good, his actions have exposed the company to significant liability." "And what do you recommend?" Alvarez asked. "Termination," Harrington replied firmly. "We need to send a clear message that our protocols exist for a reason, regardless of the circumstance." A murmur ran through the room. Malcolm sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. "Before we consider that recommendation," Alvarez said, "we should hear all perspectives. Captain Reynolds, would you care to address the board?" Malcolm stood, surveying the room of executives, most of whom had never set foot on one of the aircraft they managed. "For 7 years, I've had the privilege of flying for Summit Airlines," he began. "Before that, I served 20 years in the United States Air Force, including combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Throughout my career, one principle has guided me: the people under my command deserve dignity and protection." He paused, making eye contact with several board members. "When I stepped onto that plane yesterday, every passenger became my responsibility. Not just their physical safety, but their dignity as human beings. When Ms. Whitfield made it clear she would not sit next to two young black passengers simply because of who they are, I had a choice to make. I could follow protocol, call security, and watch as those innocent kids were likely removed to accommodate bigotry. Or I could stand for the values this company claims to uphold in all those diversity training sessions we attend. The room was completely silent now, all eyes fixed on Malcolm. I chose dignity over protocol. I chose to show those teenagers that sometimes, authority figures will stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. If that costs me my job, so be it. But I will not apologize for ensuring that every passenger on my aircraft was treated with the respect they deserve. As Malcolm returned to his seat, the boardroom door opened. A young assistant hurried in and whispered urgently to Alvarez, who nodded with surprise. "It seems we have an unexpected participant joining us," Alvarez announced. "Richard Henderson, representing the Washington family, is on video conference." The large screen at the end of the boardroom illuminated, showing the distinguished civil rights attorney alongside Jordan and Jasmine Washington and their parents. "Thank you for allowing us to join this discussion," Henderson said. "My clients have something they'd like to say directly to the board." Jasmine stepped forward, her composure remarkable for a 17-year-old addressing a corporate board. "We don't want your money or free flights," she said clearly. "What we want is a commitment that what happened to us won't happen to anyone else. We want policy changes that protect passengers from discrimination, and that support employees who stand up against it, like Captain Reynolds did for us." Jordan joined his sister. "Captain Reynolds is the only person in this situation who acted with integrity from beginning to end. If you punish him for that, you're sending a message about what Summit Airlines truly values. And it's not diversity or respect." The boardroom fell silent as the implications of the moment sank in. Whatever decision they made now would reverberate far beyond this incident, defining the company's values in the public eye for years to come. Eleanor Whitfield entered the conference room with measured steps, her demeanor starkly different from the entitled indignation she'd displayed on the aircraft. Her designer suit was impeccable as ever, but the haughty confidence was gone, replaced by something almost resembling humility. Her attorney, a severe-looking woman in her 50s, followed close behind. Malcolm rose automatically, military courtesy ingrained despite the circumstances. The panel members watched with wary curiosity as Eleanor took in the scene, her eyes finally settling on Malcolm. "Captain Reynolds," she said, her voice lacking its previous sharp edge. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Ms. Whitfield," Malcolm acknowledged with a slight nod. Victor Harrington broke the awkward silence. "Ms. Whitfield, this is unexpected. We're in the middle of a confidential disciplinary proceeding." "I'm aware," Eleanor replied. "That's precisely why I'm here." She turned to her attorney. "Ms. Blackwell, would you give us a moment? This isn't going to require legal representation after all." The attorney looked surprised but withdrew without argument, closing the door behind her. Eleanor squared her shoulders, addressing the panel directly. "I've come to withdraw my complaint against Captain Reynolds and Summit Airlines." A ripple of surprise passed through the room. Harrington's eyebrows shot up. "I don't understand. You were threatening a 7-figure lawsuit 3 days ago." "Yes, I was," Eleanor acknowledged. "But circumstances have changed. More specifically, I have changed." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "When I was removed from that flight, I was furious. Humiliated. I immediately called friends in high places, contacted attorneys, and prepared to rain hellfire on everyone involved." She glanced at Malcolm before continuing. "Then the video went viral. I watched myself through other people's eyes, heard my own words, saw my own behavior. It was illuminating, to say the least." "Ms. Whitfield," Teresa Goldman interjected, "are you saying you no longer believe you were treated unfairly?" "I'm saying I treated those children unfairly," Eleanor replied, surprising everyone. "And Captain Reynolds was right to intervene. The room fell silent as the impact of her admission sank in. Eleanor turned directly to Malcolm. "Captain Reynolds, I owe you an apology. More importantly, I owe Jordan and Jasmine Washington an apology. My behavior was inexcusable. I've spent my life priding myself on being above the crude racism of previous generations, believing my philanthropy and occasional diversity initiatives absolved me from examining my own prejudices." Her voice wavered slightly. "It took being publicly exposed, losing board positions, and having my own grandchildren refuse to speak to me to finally see myself clearly. I'm not here to salvage my reputation. That ship has sailed. I'm here because continuing this fight would compound the wrong I've already done." Malcolm studied her carefully, looking for signs of insincerity or calculated damage control. He found none. "Thank you for your honesty, Ms. Whitfield. That couldn't have been easy." Eleanor nodded, her composure briefly faltering. "I've written a personal letter to the Washington family. Whether they choose to accept my apology is entirely their decision, and I would understand if they don't. But I wanted you all to know that I'm withdrawing any claims against Summit Airlines and Captain Reynolds. In fact," she added, turning to the panel, "I believe he should be commended, not disciplined, for his actions." With that, she nodded once more to the room and departed, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. After a moment, Leona Washington broke into a smile. "Well, that was unexpected." "Indeed," Harrington muttered, looking both relieved and perplexed. Goldman turned to Malcolm. "It seems Ms. Whitfield has removed any remaining concerns about potential litigation. Captain Reynolds, you are reinstated with immediate effect. Further, the panel recommends a formal commendation for upholding company values in challenging circumstances." Malcolm nodded, maintaining his professional composure despite the sense of vindication washing over him. "Thank you. If that concludes our business, I'd like to return to flying as soon as possible." As Malcolm left Summit headquarters that afternoon, the media gathered outside had already caught wind of his reinstatement. Cameras flashed and reporters called questions, but he declined to comment, slipping into the waiting car where Leah sat behind the wheel. "How did it go?" she asked as he settled into the passenger seat. Malcolm allowed himself a small smile. "I'm flying tomorrow." 2 weeks later, in a quiet ceremony at Summit Airlines Training Center, Malcolm was presented with the company's first Excellence in Leadership award, created specifically to recognize his actions. The Washington twins attended as special guests, having returned triumphant from their academic competition in New York, Jordan with a gold medal in mathematics, Jasmine with a silver in debate. The events aboard Flight 2473 have prompted Summit Airlines to fundamentally re-examine our approach to passenger disputes involving discrimination, announced CEO Patricia Alvarez to the assembled employees and media. "Today, we're unveiling new training protocols and explicit policy guidelines ensuring that bigotry will never be accommodated on our aircraft." Afterward, Malcolm spoke privately with Jordan and Jasmine. "I hear Columbia University has expressed interest in both of you," he said. Jasmine nodded, beaming. "Early acceptance letters came yesterday. Full scholarships." "Well deserved," Malcolm replied. "Though I understand Jordan might be considering a different path." Jordan looked slightly embarrassed. "I've been thinking about aviation, actually. The mathematics of flight is fascinating." Malcolm smiled. "Summit has an excellent cadet program for aspiring pilots. I'd be honored to mentor you, if you're interested." "Really?" Jordan's eyes lit up. "That would be amazing." 1 year later, Malcolm stood at a podium at the National Airline Industry Awards, accepting the prestigious Pilot of the Year honor. The audience, a who's who of aviation executives, pilots, and industry leaders, listened intently as he spoke. "This award doesn't belong to me alone," Malcolm said, his deep voice carrying through the ballroom. "It belongs to 2 young passengers who taught an entire airline the meaning of dignity. Jordan Washington is now in our pilot training program, on track to become one of the youngest first officers in Summit history. Jasmine Washington is studying pre-law, planning to specialize in civil rights legislation. He paused, looking out at the audience. They remind us that courage sometimes means simply existing in spaces where others would deny your right to be. And they remind those of us in positions of authority that our choices matter, that standing for what's right, even when it's difficult, can create ripples that transform an entire industry. As Malcolm concluded his speech to thunderous applause, he caught sight of Jordan and Jasmine in the audience, their faces shining with pride and possibility. What had begun as an ugly incident of discrimination had blossomed into something unexpected, a catalyst for change, a foundation for mentorship, and a reminder that sometimes, doing the right thing can transform not just a moment, but many lives. This story highlights several powerful truths about confronting racism in everyday situations. First, doing what's right often requires personal sacrifice. Captain Reynolds risked his career by choosing dignity over protocol. Second, one person's courage can inspire systemic change, as Malcolm's stand led to company-wide policy reforms. Third, accountability matters. Eleanor's transformation only began when she was forced to confront her behavior through public exposure. The Washington twins demonstrate that dignity isn't just about what happens to you, but how you respond. They refuse to accept tokenistic compensation, instead demanding meaningful change. Their story shows that sometimes the greatest resistance to injustice is simply refusing to move from the space you rightfully occupy. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative reveals how institutional policies often prioritize convenience over justice. When companies choose the path of least resistance, they frequently accommodate the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. True leadership means challenging these structures, even when doing so is uncomfortable or costly. What would you have done in Captain Reynolds' position? Would you have risked your career to stand up for what's right? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in public? How did you respond? Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe in standing up against racism wherever it appears. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this powerful message about courage and accountability. Thank you for watching, and remember that sometimes the smallest acts of bravery can change not just a moment, but many lives.